Welcome to Wide Angle. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj was in Kabul day before yesterday for a short visit. At the time when there are differences over the presidential election and the outcome, and people are looking at a security transition as Western forces prepare to exit from their combat role by the end of 2014. To discuss External Affairs Minister's visit and the other aspects of the changes taking place in Afghanistan, we have today Brigadier Gurmeet Kamal, Defence Analyst, Suhasini Haider, Strategic and Diplomatic Affairs Editor, and from The Hindu, and Rana Banerjee, former Special Secretary of the Cabinet Secretariat. Welcome. Suhasini, if I may turn to you, what do you make of External Affairs Minister's first visit? It was a first visit to Afghanistan, very short visit, and at a time when there is this political transition taking place. So how do you assess that and the compulsions behind it?
It's certainly an important visit. After all, after the SARC reach out by Prime Minister Modi to Delhi, this is a significant thing by the External Affairs Minister to go. She was opening the new chancery in Kabul for the Indian Embassy. She was also announcing India's commitment to this flag monument, a $1 million commitment to a flag monument. The optics have been very good. She made 3 significant statements while she was there. She said, firstly, that India is the first strategic partner of Afghanistan, aware of the responsibilities there, that we are here to stay, those were her exact words, and that this is a defining decade of transformation for Afghanistan. I think what was lacking perhaps was in the way forward, where India and Afghanistan hope to go from here, given the Afghan government has made it very clear what they are hoping from India.
Well, President Karzai has.
Yes.
In fact, he has made 14 visits to India during his tenure as President of Afghanistan, which is quite a record in itself. I don't think there is any other country which he has visited with the same amount of frequency. But Rana, looking at it from your perch, how do you look at our continuing role in Afghanistan?
Well, there is no gainsaying India's need to send a clear message to stand by the new elected president during the transition. But the grim news is about the ground situation, particularly in the south and in the east. The recent pattern of fighting has shown that the ANA, that is the Afghan National Army, has lost ground to the Taliban, both in Helmand province, in the fighting in Musakala, Sangin, Nahr Siraj, as also in the east in Hisarak area of Nangarhar. And the pattern of these resurgence or the recent attacks by the Taliban shows that they have gone back to increased mass number of fighters. Partly this could be due to some of the North Waziristan remnants coming in, and they have brought in greater number of arms and ammunition, and this has helped the Taliban to make certain gains.
When External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj was there, she also talked about the fact that not only did she inaugurate the new Chancery complex, but she also said we are also buying the old building. And that's what she used as an example of our commitment to stay the course. And of course, the old Chancery was the one which had come under attack in 2008. But she did not end up meeting either of the candidates, either Dr. Abdullah or Dr. Ashraf Ghani. What do you make of that?
Well, I certainly think it's India's way of showing that they do not have any more commitment to Afghanistan than to the Afghan government. And therefore, meeting President Karzai was important to them. Should they have been meeting, given that in the past few months, the leaders who have gone through have made a point of meeting both those leaders? Even right now, just last week when the German foreign minister was here, he made a point of meeting both of them. I think it's making it very clear that India does not see for itself a role in the political reconciliation that has come out of the crisis of that election. Should India have a bigger role is a different question. And I also want to make the point that that wish list we spoke about, the visits by President Karzai, they are asking for very specific things when it comes to helicopters, when it comes to jeeps. There's been no response so far from the new government. It's early days yet, but that is what they're looking for. I'm just reading from an article that the Afghan ambassador to India has written in Foreign Policy, and he said very clearly that India has so far been reluctant to commit adequate attention and aid in support of Afghanistan, which really has been a cause for disappointment for them. How seriously we should take that is certainly something to discuss.
Brigadier, do we have an idea of the wish list that the Afghan government, that President Karzai has given to us? I mean, something has been talked about.
They want everything from helicopter gunships downwards to guns, mortars, rocket launchers, jeep-mounted rocket launchers, and non-weapon equipment.
Let me phrase the question differently. What is the current kind of equipment that they have? Because after all, you have to have a certain threat perception, and based on that threat perception, you go into acquisition of equipment.
In fact, this is a major lacking in the organizational setup of the Afghan National Army. They are armed with small arms.
Only,
which means maximum of medium machine guns. Small arms rifles and carbines, light machine guns, medium machine guns, that is it.
And so what are they seeking? What is now the additionality that they are seeking?
For everything else, they've been dependent on the NATO ISAF forces. Helicopter gunships downward. I'm not talking of fighter ground attack strike aircraft, but helicopter gunships downwards. Even for casualty evacuation, they've been dependent on NATO. So they're seeking what we call in the army battalion support weapons and artillery. That's what they want.
So essentially artillery and army battalion support weapons for medical evacuation.
Support weapons and equipment for medical evacuation, particularly helicopters, Humvee type of stretcher, vehicles, wheeled vehicles which have stretchers in them for casualty evacuation.
And which are protected.
Which are protected. The entire gamut of logistic support elements which they lack.
Are we in a position to provide them with this equipment? Do we manufacture it? Do we have enough surplus capacity? And then we come to, of course, the funding. I mean, we'll come to that, but I think the first question is, do we manufacture it? Do we have adequate surplus? And so on.
We can give them most of what they're asking for from our war wastage reserve stores, and we have enough of them. Perhaps not meet their full requirement in one go, but over a period of 3 to 5 years meet it completely. But it's a question of politics, geopolitics. We are extremely concerned about Pakistan's sensibilities if we supply weapons and related equipment to the Afghan National Army, because that will apparently not go down with Pakistan. In official circles, the reading is that Pakistan will then once again step up its proxy war against India, which had been at a low ebb during the Musharraf years and the Zardari years, and which there has been some variation in the last year or so, year and a half.
Rana, if I may turn to you, how far would you share Brigadier Gurmeet Kamal's assessment that were we to step up in terms of supplying military hardware? Although I would think that Humvees which have stretchers, I mean this medical evacuation equipment, that is not something which is in any way giving them an offensive capability. So, but nonetheless, how would you react to it that would provoke the Pakistanis into stepping up their
I think
activities?
This has been the sensibility on account of which the response hasn't been quicker or more forthcoming. What has perhaps been tried is to get some of these supplies to come from Russia and to make finances available for the same. But this again has been a trickle, whereas the Afghan army's needs are immediate, particularly for helicopter gunships and aerial support. Otherwise, the ANA is a capable fighting force in terms of holding its own. But when there is a mass, resurgence from the Taliban, plus increased firing support from across the border by Pakistan, as has happened in Kunar recently, then the problems arise. A stalemate type of situation prevails on the ground. So we would need to help, but like if we keep worrying about the perception that the Pakistanis would get annoyed, then we are not going to get anywhere.
Gurmeet, you wanted to come in.
I think we should look at the entire issue right at the strategic level. I look at peace and stability in Afghanistan and our long-term stakes in Afghanistan as a vital national interest. There are national interests and there are vital national interests. When we were asked to send a division to Iraq, it was not a vital national interest, and we wisely did not do so. But Afghanistan is a vital national interest for various reasons, and the definition of a vital national interest is that you should be prepared to defend it by military force if necessary. So, without worrying about Pakistan's sensibilities, we must supply to them the equipment and the weapons they have asked for, which is there in the strategic partnership agreement.
You know, you made a very important point. You said national interest and vital national interest. But are you, now I'm going to ask a very provocative question. Are you implying therefore that if necessary, India should be prepared to put boots on the ground?
See, we can fight the Taliban in Afghanistan, or we can fight them at Atari Wagha. We'll have to do one of them in the years ahead.
But we will have to fight them.
We will have to fight them. It is better to fight them in Afghanistan. I know the logistics are terrible. Chabahar, Zaranj, Delaram highway onto, and we should opt to go to Mazar-e-Sharif or Herat rather than breathing down Pakistan's neck in Kandahar and Jalalabad and Ghazni, etc. But we should begin with a brigade group and ratchet it up to a division. If we are invited.
So, Hasini, I think you wanted to.
I just wanted to make the point that even Afghanistan has not asked us for troops on the ground. They have said very categorically that they do not need foreign troops inside Afghanistan.
I think
that is part of the problem.
Is a fatigue
that is part of the problem. But
troops.
Of course, Brigadier Karnwal is absolutely right, because once you send the equipment, then you're going to have to train them. Are you going to be able to train everybody inside India? How are you going to do the transfer of technology, the maintenance and all the rest of that? So these are very valid questions. But I think it's very important to know when you ask the question about boots on the ground, that that's not something Afghanistan has said it wants.
We must be invited. There'll be some conditions quite naturally. We should be invited. We should preferably go under a UN flag, and that's what we prefer to work under, you know, when we intervene internationally. If those conditions are met, we must make the commitment.
I think international presence will, in any case, international military presence will diminish very rapidly, and we will probably see a new resolution in the UN Security Council once the ISAF term comes to an end, as it will at the end of 2014. But this brings me to one last aspect pertaining to the security arrangements, which is the bilateral security agreement, which is still pending with the United States. How important is that agreement, Rana?
Oh, it's very important, but the question is that
because the numbers are small.
Yes, 10 to 12,000, but the importance lies in the fact that what sort of powers they will have, if it's going to be a commando formation, whether they will be able to go in for search and seizure measures, whether they will be able to assist the ANA forces, they will need some legal protection. All this is provided for in the agreement, provided the new interim, whichever government comes in, signs the accord.
So it is not just symbolic, even though the presence is small, it is not just a symbolic presence, but it has enormous significance in strategic and intelligence terms.
In operational terms.
In operational terms.
Of course.
The United States will not have a military personnel being tried under Afghan laws. That is the essence of the agreement.
Quite so.
It is time for a short break, but we will come back to this issue.
मैं तो सीधी सीधी बात करने वाला आदमी हूँ कि जिस जगह पे सत्य है वहाँ खुदा है, जिस जगह पे अहिंसा है वहाँ ईश्वर है।
Welcome back to Wide Angle. We were discussing the transitions taking place in Afghanistan in light of External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj's recent visit. We've talked of the defense side, the security side of the situation in Afghanistan, but let me turn to the political transition, the presidential election. So Hasini, we have had two rounds, the first round and the second round. The outcome is still being discussed and debated. The final result has not been declared. How does this look?
Well, it certainly looks disastrous if you think that everything is supposed to happen in 2014. The pullout is supposed to happen in 2014. We've had a change in government. They have to negotiate with a new power dispensation inside Afghanistan. That is not happening. We had expected that actually by July 4th, you would have had a president in Afghanistan, and that hasn't happened either. And none of the international efforts at bringing together some kind of forging, you had the US Secretary of State go there and
two visits in 3 weeks.
And actually announce a solution which now the two don't seem to be able to agree on. The critical thing will be when the UN mandated third round comes out, or when the audit of the second round comes out. Are both leaders going to accept that result? And I think what you are going to see is that President Karzai may stop being president if there is a successor, but that his role will be equally important in forging together the future kind of national unity government, if that is what Afghanistan is going to have. But the state of flux that has happened for 6 months, this was, by now we were supposed to have had the presidential inauguration, is going to weigh very heavily, because of course the Taliban is waiting and watching. They know that there is going to be even more weakness as the international pullout happens, as there is a sense of confusion at the top, and this kind of delay is not going to be good all around.
Dr. Abdullah, former foreign minister, and Dr. Ashraf Ghani, former finance minister. Both of them have had very close relationships with India. Both of them are friends of India. They have visited India a number of times. And from what it appears at the moment is that they have agreed to form a national unity government, but there are still some constitutional issues to be worked out in terms of how, because after all, Afghanistan has a presidential form of government at the moment under its constitution. So how do you go about devolving power or sharing power between the president and the CEO? And do you think, is it possible to find solutions to something like this in this manner, Brigadier?
They will have to do that, because political instability has an extremely negative impact on the security situation and the way the Afghan National Army and the Afghan police conduct their operations. So one possible solution could be that they have a rotatory president for an agreed period. It could be 1 year at a time. It could be as short as, if they don't trust each other, which appears likely, it could be as short as 6 months at a time. Not the happiest of solutions, but one possible option.
Or what they have talked about, Rana, is the idea of a CEO, which subsequently will become a prime minister.
Well, yes, that would need amendment of the constitution and a loya jirga. Again, on the ground, the situation looks very gloomy, because Dr. Abdullah has just announced that he is not going to accept the audit at the stage that it is, and it is almost going to conclude in a day or two. That's the decision.
We heard that the audit had been concluded, but the results have been withheld.
Yes, 22,800 ballot boxes have been audited, both the direct audit and a special audit of 5,000 ballot boxes. And both Dr. Abdullah and also Ata Muhammad Noor, the governor of Balkh, they have said that they would not like to accept anything that is the result of fraud. So portents are not very good, in the sense that if they walk away, then we are slowly moving towards ethnic schism and a civil war situation again.
Now let me turn to India's role, and India has committed something like $2 billion of economic cooperation and assistance, and India is considered to be, in any kind of an opinion poll that has been undertaken in Afghanistan, India is always considered to be the most favored country or the most friendly country. The cooperation program that we have undertaken covers humanitarian aspects, it covers capacity building, and covers infrastructure. And as you said, when External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj was there, she further committed to the monument, and I'm told that it is the biggest flag that they had carried, and it is still at night. You can see it atop a hill from all across Kabul, and it's a magnificent sight. How does India safeguard its presence? The people who are working there, the Indians who are working there, the teachers, the doctors, the businessmen, and so on. How does India safeguard its presence, its economic role?
Well, so far, because its presence has been in this manner, I think that itself has been a kind of safeguard. We've seen attacks.
Not really. Yes, we have seen attacks.
In the same way as perhaps when there was a larger idea of a security role. India also has a huge amount of goodwill. I mean, if you see the way that they defended our Herat consulate in Afghanistan, part of it was duty, but part of it, and I'm sure you will know this better than anyone else, is the immense goodwill that that people in Afghanistan feel for India, which will continually mean that India needs to remain engaged in there. But the question is larger. India has been the first signatory of a strategic partnership. What is the point of that strategic partnership if India is not willing to then get into what that means in terms of its security role inside Afghanistan? In terms of just securing its interests, that's something that eventually is originally the responsibility of the Afghan government.
True.
But India does have a responsibility in terms of helping the Afghan government, and it is something that India is a signatory to.
Do you think people talk about regional approaches, Rana?
Well,
is that because now that people feel that there is a sense of fatigue in terms of US engagement with this part of the world or NATO engagement, and therefore there have been a lot of conferences taking place, the Istanbul process, the Heart of Asia process, and so on, where people are exploring the idea of a regional approach to ensuring stability of Afghanistan. Is that possible politically?
Politically, it is possible, but it's a non-starter as of now, because primarily Turkey seems to have lost interest in furthering or shepherding the Heart of Asia, process, and ultimately it will only result in some, dropping down of economic aid. Slowly, they will be there from some of the regional powers, but nobody will come forward to take the security responsibility. So the crux of it would be, short of putting boots on the ground, India should fulfill all the needs of Afghanistan on the defense relationship in terms of defense supplies, equipment, sustaining the ANA. If the American or the NATO aid for ANA tapers off, then we have to substitute it in material and substantial terms. That's the only way that we can stave off the concerted, Taliban, Pakistan aided Taliban resurgence.
Another issue that is often raised is the legacy of President Karzai, and in some ways now that we see this dilemma over the outcome of the presidential election between Dr. Abdullah and Dr. Ashraf Ghani, do you think that in hindsight President Karzai played a crucial role in keeping Afghanistan together?
I think despite his failures, foibles, he's done pretty well in keeping Afghanistan together, and history will remember him kindly.
Suhasini?
I think so, and I think he's already built that place for his legacy, because there is a reason why he's reportedly built his post-retirement home inside the presidential compound there in Kabul. He will be
that is also for his own security
as well, but he will be a constant presence for whoever occupies the presidential position. There is also a reason that the bilateral strategic agreement with America, although he had promised it, has not yet been negotiated, because I think that he sees for himself a role post the next incumbent in terms of still continuing to negotiate for Afghanistan with other international powers as well, and certainly his experience, because he's gone through the gamut. He was once the favorite person of the United
and
States,
then went out of
and
favor,
then felt that they were actually actively trying to oust him in the previous election. So given that his experience, I think any new incumbent will also want to keep that legacy going. I think it's also very significant how many visits he has made to India.
Afghanistan has certainly made a lot of progress in the last decade. Its economic GDP, it has registered almost a 9 to 10% growth year after year. Life expectancy has gone up from 40 to 61 years. From 9 lakh boys in school in 2002, today it has something like 8 million children in school, out of which 1/3 are girls. All of these are enormous achievements. From a few hundred kilometers of roads, today Afghanistan has 10,000 kilometers of roads, providing for connectivity. It has a free press, it has a free media, it has a number of private television channels, newspapers, radio stations, and so on. But at the same time, there are 3 complicated transitions that have been telescoped: the political transition, the security transition, and linked to that, if these don't go well, an economic transition. This is the kind of challenge, and I think External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj's visit at this point in time was a message of solidarity, was a reaffirmation of India's commitment to a stable Afghanistan. Thank you for watching.